So, good morning, everyone. So, welcome to this 1-hour live webinar of the EurObserv'ER project 2022. People are just dropping in. Please allow us a minute or so for other people to enter this room. I see more people joining the lobby in the waiting room. Welcome. So, as people come into this room, a warm welcome from my side on behalf of the entire EurObserv'ER team and on behalf of the European Commission, who is funding our project. Welcome to this 1-hour live webinar. We want to present some results of the report, the State of Renewable Energies in Europe report we have just recently released, and this live webinar serves the purpose of presenting the key results of the state of renewable energies in Europe. A warm welcome. And what you see here, you see myself. My name is Roman Buss. I'm the presenter and moderator of this event, and my colleagues from the team who will be speaking to you and present the project, but also the key chapters and results of our report. For the housekeeping rules, I would just like to say that yes, of course, we will provide the slides and the presentation to all in the follow-up of this webinar and upload on our website. And also a remark that we are recording this session. So there will be the option to review this, and we will also provide the recording of this webinar to all. Before I show you the agenda, I would like to ask you to be interactive and talk to us. You will have the option of asking questions in the chat. There's a chat option in the box below. Ask some question to the speakers, and we will get back to your questions ideally at the end of this session. We will have 45 minutes roughly of presentation and then have 15 minutes of Q&A session where we like to respond to your questions in the chat. I hope this is the format is also okay for you. So before we hand over to the project, I would just share a brief poll with you. We would just want to know about the audience. We want to know a bit more about the audience and where you're coming from, what you're working on. So I just launch a short poll, which you should be able to see on your screen or in the chat version. Our question to you is, in what type of organizations you work, what your background is. So are you coming from a governmental organization or a non-governmental body? Are you from the research sphere? Are you from the energy industry? And then you should be able to see our audience, or we should get a better idea. Does that work? I hope you see it and you can respond to our poll. Yes, okay, I see some bars evolving. Research, science, academia seems to be a big part of the audience, but also from the energy industry. We do have some renewable energy or energy hydrogen association representatives. Yeah, some consulting think tanks. Okay, but there seems to be a focus on the research university peer group here. Great, okay, it's good to have this impression from you. Good, I will just show you some, go with you through the agenda. And yeah, what you see here, your presenters today, as said, my name is Roman Buss. We have as speakers here our team lead and the project coordinator, Diane Lescaut, from our team lead EurObserv'ER in France. Also, my colleague, Frédéric Thuillier, also from EurObserv'ER. He will present on the energy indicators. Our team also consists of the Fraunhofer Institute, EC, and we have Anna Billerbeck here. And finally, Floris Uhlemann from TNO Energy Transition. So these are the speakers of our webinar here today. Also, on behalf of Vito, which is a project partner, we have Floris Uhlemann will take over the part of Vito and present their parts. On the agenda, what we do in the next 45 hours is just give you a glimpse on our annual report and about the single chapters, about the energy indicators, about the socio-economic indicators, about the costs and price developments in the European Union on renewable energy sources, avoided fossil fuel use, and finally, a section on innovation competitiveness. So this is our agenda. And if you just click to the next slide, I want to hand over to our project lead, Diane Lescaut. She will give us a glimpse, a short overview over this project, what we have done over the last, 20 years, and then hand over to the single speakers. Please note your questions in the chat, and we will respond to that in the Q&A session later. Diane, over to you.
Yes, hello. I'm Diane Lescaut from EurObserv'ER. EurObserv'ER is a French non-for-profit association dedicated to the monitoring and promotion of renewable energies. Next slide, please. Christophe. Yes, thank you. So I'm not going to go throughout 20 years of production, no. But I will just present briefly the projects and what we do. Maybe many of you may be familiar with it, but nonetheless, I will guide you through some of our productions. So EurObserv'ER, Renact TNO, Fraunhofer Easy have been working together for quite some time now on this project, and we welcome Vito this year as a new contributor. EurObserv'ER founded the EurObserv'ER project in 1999 with, at the time, the support of ADEME and already of the European Commission. The aim of this project is to provide an up-to-date monitoring of the deployment of renewable energy technologies in the EU. And we achieved that through two main productions, which are firstly the thematic barometers that are produced every 2 months and that give estimates for the deployment of renewable energy sources, technologies under survey in year N-1. These estimates are supported by a qualitative analysis that gives relevant information in terms of policies implementation, in terms of industrial context and main industry players. Our other main production in the project is, of course, the overview barometer, the latest of which is the subject of today's webinar. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is an overview of our usual publication calendar. So we start the year with the annual report, so this overview barometer and the wind power barometer, which has just been released as well. Next, the photovoltaics in April, May. In June, the solar thermal and a concentrated solar power barometer. In September, we have usually we published a biofuels barometer, but with the important development of resin transport, we decided to enlarge the scope of this barometer, so it's now resin transport. This year in October, November, we will have a barometer focusing on ocean energy, but you see that throughout the years, the October barometer could be also on heat pumps, as was in last year, or on biogas and heat pumps again. And in December, we end with the solid biofuels. Yes, you can go. So we have released the 20th edition of the State of Renewable Energies in Europe, end of February. This is a complete overview of the status of RES deployment in the EU and of the impacts of this deployment in terms of socio-economic impacts, environmental impacts, competitivity impacts. We have introduced in this edition, as we do every time we introduce new features, in this edition, yes, in orange you can see the new focuses that we have introduced. So one on the market share of electrical capacities, the breakdown between technologies, a chapter on electricity storage capacities. Also, we are giving the level of prices of energy in the renewable energy cost and prices chapter, and avoided the impacts of the deployment of RET in the EU in terms of avoided greenhouse gases emissions. Next slide, please. Yes. So just a final glimpse on what we produce outside of the barometers. So you can find any, all our productions on the website. So all reports can be downloaded from the website in English and French. French is the French translation is allowed thanks to the support of ADEME, the National French Energy Agency. We also publish a RES policy report with an overview of all measures implemented in each EU member state for the development of RES. We publish case studies on innovative financial schemes. We have a press corner where you can find illustrations from the barometers. And very importantly, you can find here an interactive database on the right below corner, where all data published in the barometer in the overview can be downloaded in Excel files. So it's very handy, and you can use that. You can see for yourself. This edition of the barometer is almost totally uploaded and will be finalized in the next few weeks. Thank you very much. And I'll leave the floor to my colleague Frédéric.
Frédéric, you're still muted. Please unmute yourself.
Sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Diane. Good morning, everybody. So now I'm going to present some results from the energy chapter. Each renewable sector is presented through several indicators about installed capacity, total capacity operating, or energy generated for all the 27 European member states, and that's for 12 renewable technologies, which are covered on the review barometer. And now I'm just going to present some results about main RES shares. So the first slide is about the electricity generation. And in 2020, the electricity renewable energies were boosted by a good climatic condition for wind and hydropower. And the renewable sources have provided 37.5% of total gross electricity production in the EU 27. So 1 year before, this share was at 34.1%. And in 2020, 1,058 terawatt-hours have been produced from renewable sources. So like the past years, wind power stays the first renewable sector for electricity production, with 397 terawatt-hours. And the second sector was hydropower, that produced 346 terawatt-hours. But while wind and water hydropower contributed most to generating renewable electricity, it was solar power that really expanding during that year. And because solar power had a particularly good year in 2020, because the European continent enjoyed highest number of sunshine hours. And this sunshine record, it was a record since satellite readings began in 1983. So with this sunshine record, combined with the increase in production capacity, of course, explains the rise of this technology to produce 144 terawatt hours in 2020. And concerning the country's status, the country's position, almost all member states have improved their own position in 2020 regarding 2019, and 14 member states were above a threshold of 30% of race shares in their electricity generation. And among this group, 6 countries were above 50% share. Now, on the next slide, I'm going to present another aspect of the renewable energy penetration. Is about their share in the heat and cooling consumption. So in 2020, with 105 million of ton oil equivalent, renewable sectors has reached a 23.1% share during that year. 1 year before, this share was at 22.44%. So the evolution of this indicator is, of course, directly linked to the development of renewable sectors, but the analysis is also made difficult by the succession of mild winters in Europe, which is a consequence of global warming, and the heating needs are directly correlated with the average temperature level. And of course, during 2020, the COVID pandemic also played a role, limited the European Union's energy needs. And this fall in the energy needs for heating and cooling also triggered the rise of renewable share. So regarding the renewable sources, solid biofuels remains the first sector with nearly 79 million tons of oil equivalent, which represent 75% of the total renewable heat production in Europe. But the most fast-growing trend was for heat pump sector, which reached 13 million tons of oil equivalent and 13% of the total renewable heat production. This technology has taken advantage of policies of countries that have introduced regulations in favor of electrifying heating needs, like France, Finland, or even Sweden. And in the following years, for sure, heat pumps will be more and more growing. But regarding the current situation, not surprisingly, the renewable share in heat consumption is higher in forest countries, especially those located in northern part of Europe. And in 2020, 13 member states were above 30% threshold for race in their heat and cooling consumption. And in this group, 6 were above 50% share. And at the opposite, at the bottom of the graph, 3 countries were under a 10% share. And now the slide about the race shares in gross final energy consumption. Thank you. So the year 2020 was marked a major deadline for European member states, because an energy market that has been an energy target dedicated on the ratios on gross final energy consumption has been set by European directive in 2009. And this target is about the share of the gross final consumption. It was the main target to all European countries. And at the end of 2020, the race shares across all European countries reached 22.1%. And it's a success because the target was to reach a threshold of 20%. And as for the two first ratios commented, the reduction in energy consumption caused by the COVID pandemic also played a role, but also the good performance of all sectors and mostly in renewable energy electricity production really triggered this success. Each EU member state had its own target for 2020, and these targets taken into account the starting point situation, as well as the renewable energy potential, the ambitions for each country, and the economic performances specific to each country. So in 2020, almost all European member states have reached their goal. Countries with the widest success margins were Sweden, Finland, Croatia, or Bulgaria. But one country missed its target. It was France, and it missed around. Yes, it's on this screen. Yeah, on this slide, it missed around more than 2 point of percentage to reach the target. Now, the current renewable energy directive, so the RED 2, is targeting 32% shares by 2030, but this goal is now considered as too low regarding the climate emergency. So probably this target will evolve in the future. And for example, the Fit for 55 package could lead to a new target at 40% for 2030, which means we will have to double the current level within a decade. And that's all for these indicators. And now I just want to present briefly a new indicators which has been introduced in our overview. It was an indicator about the renewable sector's market shares of all generating capacities connected to the power grid in 2020, including also fossil and nuclear fuels. So during that year, 32.3 gigawatt of new electrical capacity were connected for all European countries, and renewable technologies dominated these newly connected capacities by representing 91% of this total. So just two countries, Germany and Poland, has connected fossil or coal or fossil gas new plants during that year, and coal-fired power plants contributed for just 6%, and it was 3% for gas-fired power plants. And meanwhile, PV and wind weighting in at 55% and 32%. So that's
Thanks,
all
Frederic.
from me. Thank you. And now I will leave the floor to Florence.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Frederic, for these insights.
Sure.
Before I hand over to Anna on the rest in renewable energies in the heating sector and building sector, there was a question in the chat that Diane has already responded. Yes, we are collecting data. Ideally, we would have data for all of these sectors for 2021, but you can imagine for 27 member countries and for 10 renewable energy sectors, it's not that quick. The data availability is not yet there. So that is the reason why our annual report is focusing on 2020 only, and in the next thematic reports we will focus on 21 data.
That's right. Yeah, we already
Anna.
done. Sorry,
sure.
we already done a dedicated barometer on wind power, presenting 21 figures. And during all that year, we will present 21 figures, and the overview barometer presenting all 21 figures will be presented in next year in February.
Thanks a lot, Frederic. Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So yeah, my name is Anna Billerbeck, and I work at the Fraunhofer Institute for System and Innovation Research, which is a research institute in Germany. And I will present one of our focus topics of the overview barometer, which looks into the integration of renewable heating and cooling in the building stock and urban areas. And overall, there are very slow changes in the heating and cooling sector in buildings, and this is mainly because of long lifetimes of heating and cooling technologies. And yeah, on this first slide, we can have a look at the first indicator, the consumption shares. So this first indicator shows the current consumption of energy for heating and cooling by type of fuel. So for example, in Sweden, on the right side of the figure, we see a mix of oil, gas, electric heating, biomass, solar thermal, and also district heating. Overall, we see that fossil fuel heating is still dominating in about half of the countries. So we have quite high shares of coal, oil, and natural gas in several member states. But we also see quite high shares of biomass in some countries. So biomass is the most relevant renewable energy source in the heating sector, and it reached especially high shares in Croatia, Romania, and Latvia. Heat pumps are slightly growing, but they still have only very low shares, and mainly in the Scandinavian countries such as Sweden and Finland. District heating is especially strong in the Scandinavian countries and in the East European countries. And thereby, it is important to highlight that district heating is a mix of fossil and renewable fuels. And this is also the reason why we looked into district heating in more detail. And here on this slide, you see the mix of district heating in countries where district heating covers at least 3% or more of the heating demand. Overall, we also see quite a strong dominance of fossil fuels. So district heating is still largely based on fossil fuels. But in some countries, we also see a strong contribution of biofuels or biomass, especially in Sweden, Lithuania, and Denmark. Large-scale heat pumps reach only low shares, again, especially in the Scandinavian countries. And also industrial waste heat reach only very low shares in a few countries. Then on the next slide, we can have a look at another indicator, which is the market sales share. So the market sales shares indicates the dynamic of heating technologies by illustrating the sales shares of different heating technologies. So here the number of sold systems is shown. And because of a lack of data, the number of fossil fuel systems is estimated based on the change of consumption, of course, in consideration of heating degree days. And what we see from the figure is that there is still high sales numbers of fossil fuel heating technologies, but only in very few countries. There is quite a strong dynamic of district heating connections. So in the figure, we see the number of connected households to district heating, and this reaches quite high numbers in several countries. Solar thermal has a strong dynamic in some countries, and also heat pumps have in some countries, especially the Scandinavian and also the Baltic countries, quite a high dynamic. The highest share of sold heat pumps can be observed in Estonia. So in summary, we can conclude that in some countries, renewable heating consumption and also the dynamic in sales of renewable heating systems is quite high. So overall, there's more dynamic in the renewable heating and cooling sector in buildings than in the previous years. However, there's still a long way to go to reach energy and climate targets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for these insights on the heating and cooling sector. Very crucial sector, of course, in terms of goal attainment for Paris targets, but also for the energy transitions worldwide. Another important, crucial element of the energy transitions around the globe is, of course, socio-economic impacts of renewable energies. And for policymakers, this is often, of course, a very important figure. How much jobs does it create with this renewable energy revolution? How much jobs are gained and lost? And here we find some figures for the European countries. I hand over to Floris Uhlemann from TNO Energy Transition and Innovation for Life, it's called. And they have some new figures on employment and turnover and other socio-economic indicators. Floris.
Yes, thank you, Roman, for the introduction. My name is Floris Juleman. I'm a researcher at TNO, which is the Applied Research Institute of the Netherlands. And I work together with my colleagues of the Energy Transition Systems Unit in Amsterdam. And we're here to explain to you a few things that we have discussed in the report, starting with the socio-economic indicators. Let's see if this clicking, yeah. One of the most important indicators that we also look at in this report is the employment rate. And since 2017, we use a modeling approach as opposed to a survey-based approach to estimate the turnover and employment for all renewable energy technologies. And this is a mathematical approach that provides consistency over time. I will show you some of the results in the next few slides, but maybe first a few additional things that were added to this report is a new indicator that was included on request of the European Commission, which is the gross added value. This indicator is derived from the turnover results and also Eurostat statistics. And I won't go into detail in this indicator too much, but I'll tell you a bit about it in the next slides. Furthermore, the importance of using the latest data is obviously very evident, and therefore also for this 2021 edition, we have updated the key input data, such as the investment and operation and maintenance costs, but also installed capacity and a few other data indicators. So we made a big update again on that. If you want to know more about the methodology, here's a little bit of a teaser on what is in the report, but I'm not going to read you through this because that will be a boring read for now. But let's look at the next numbers that we are actually presenting in the report. One extra note actually is that the numbers now don't include the UK anymore since they left the EU. So bear in mind that if you want to compare the total numbers to previous years. So for the turnover numbers, you can see them on the table on the right hand side. Not sure if you can fully read them, but I'll share a few of the highlights. In 2020, the total turnover was 163 billion compared to the year before where it was just under 150 billion. So we see an increase there. We also see an increase in the total employment, which I will show on the next slide, from 1.25 million jobs to 1.31 million jobs in 2020. Interestingly, the turnover estimate for the EU 27 was actually higher than for the EU 28 in 2018. So without the UK, we also see a big rise there. Of the renewable energy sectors, we see that wind, heat pumps, and solid biomass are have the largest turnover estimates, followed by also the other technologies. And as I mentioned before, the new indicator, the gross value added, is also included in the report. I won't show it here, but to conclude shortly, they follow similar trends as the turnover rates. And for more detail, please see the report. Finally, if we look at the member states, we see that the leading country in turnover rates is Germany, followed by France and Spain. And this also the same order for the turnover as well for the gross value added and the employment rates. Now, in this final slide on the socio-economic indicators, I'll show you a few numbers about the employment distribution per sector. So what we see here is that heat pumps actually surpassed solid biofuels in employment and in turnover. And additionally, we also see that wind energy is closing the gap in employment numbers, having quite some growth in employment in the last years. Now, we also see that technologies where their estimates of employment declined, especially for PV. We saw a decline after a record year in 2019. And one might wonder, okay, what is the cause of that? Is it COVID? Is it that the sector is not being able to keep up with the yearly high growth levels? Or do we think the sun will die out soon? I don't know. I'm kidding. We don't know, but these are interesting changes that we that hopefully will provoke some good discussions about renewable energy technologies. And just a slight indication that we also evaluated the total installed capacity numbers, and we also saw a decline in capacity for PV and hydro, which might also indicate a decrease in employment distribution. Now, these were for the socio-economic indicators. Next up on the list is the renewable energy costs, prices, and competitiveness of these costs. We'll show you a few of these graphs and also a new indicator which we included this year, the weighted average cost of capital. But first, let me show you a bit about the cost side. So TNO has developed a programmed model to estimate one of the important indicators for the renewable energy costs, namely the levelized cost of energy. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go into the methodology of the model, but we do have time to look at this overall graph that we also show in the report, because these are the estimates for the renewable energy technologies and for 2022. And what we see here is that you see the black bar. These are the average estimates of the levelized cost of energy per technology. And then the ranges indicate the lowest value and the highest value for the different member states as they vary across member states. So yeah, it's everybody can have a look and see what they mean in more detail in the report. But these are the levelized cost of energy now in 2020 that we want to show here. Furthermore, the costs have been updated, as said before, compared to the previous edition. And on the right side here, you can see the cost development and the investment costs now for the renewable energies according to the JRC. So we've updated the new data. The ranges indicate the different data that is compiled, and we see as the reference lies within these ranges that well, we can say that they're at least within these ranges for wind, PV, and bioenergy. Now, there is a new indicator that we introduced, which is the weighted average cost of capital. The results are actually also included in the model for the LCOE. So these are also shown here in the graph. But since it is a new indicator, I would like to shortly discuss what it is, how we approached it, and show you a bit of the results. So the weighted average cost of capital. Some of you might be familiar with this a lot more than I am, but as we understand it, it's the rate that a company or institution is expected to pay on average to finance and acquire its assets. And it's an interesting approach to also see how we can really finance renewable energy. What we try to do is we try to develop a bottom-up approach by building up certain parameters of this indicator by using data collection and by expert judgment to validate our underlying assumptions. I want to say a quick thing about one of the assumptions that we evaluate the cost of equity and the cost of debt, and these combined, they give the cost of capital. And in the Dutch subsidy calculations, we also do these calculations. We use that as the underlying assumption. So we derive this cost of equity from the Dutch subsidy scheme. And in order to account for the differences across member states, we use the assumptions for the Netherlands. We subtract the risk-free rate of the Netherlands and we add the risk-free rate of the member states to in the end come to cost of equity ranges for each of the technologies and also for each of the member states. So this is just a short summary of the underlying assumptions. We see, for example, that there's low risk for certain technologies like wind onshore and PV. They're more developed, and there's a higher risk for technologies such as bioenergy. Well, these also account for the differences in the cost of equity and in the debt share that is underlying. Now, of course, this is a difficult parameter to really make detailed and concise, but this is the first time we do this in this project, and we hope to further develop this methodology and improve the data in the coming years. So if you want to know more about what is the underlying data, what are the assumptions, and how do you want to improve these, please read the report. Now let's have a short look at the results that come out of this estimations. It's a bit of a big table here, but let me highlight a few things that are interesting to note. We see that there is a lower weighted average cost of capital for technologies that are more mature, in countries that have more stable economic and political conditions, and also where there is a larger scale of deployment. So, for example, for wind onshore, we see lower rates for Belgium and for Germany, and also for offshore for the Netherlands and PV for Luxembourg, for example. On the other side, we see higher WACC rates. These are a bit more on the opposite side for less mature technologies, unstable conditions, riskier deployment rates, which you see back in the results. For example, in Greece, there's a higher cost of capital for bioenergy technologies, and also in Latvia and Romania for hydropower, for example. Now, if you want to dive into all these details a bit more, this is all I can show you for today. And therefore, I would like to go to the next part of today, which is the avoided fuel cost and avoided fuel use. All credits of the results here go to Vito, as they have prepared all the text and the results in the reports, but I have the honor to represent their work, so please bear in mind if I say anything that doesn't make sense at all. Yes, so the amount of avoided fossil fuels are annually analyzed by the European Environment Agency, and its topic center on climate mitigation. And these fossil fuel types are assumed to be substituted are transport fuels, so for example, diesel and gasoline, fuels used for heating, so like gaseous fuels, petroleum products, and also non-renewable waste, and fuels used for production of electricity, so a mix of gaseous, solid, and oil products. The avoided fuel costs are based on the country-specific fuel prices, which are derived from data like Eurostat, European Commission, and NASDAQ. And in the barometer, there are also figures with result per country if you want to go into more detail. An important note is that there was a change in the methodology since the previous version, because the reference year is now taken as 2005, since it is largely attributed to the presence of the national targets for 2020. And with this change, the estimates are in line with the ones from the European Environment Agency. Now, there's also the effects on the greenhouse emissions that are avoided. So these effects are based on the data available from Eurostat for primary energy consumption, for example, calculating avoided fossil fuels for primary energy, and on CO2 emission factors per fuel type from the European Commission. And the term gross avoided greenhouse gas emissions illustrates the theoretical character of the effects estimated in this way, as these contributions do not necessarily represent the net savings per se, or are not based on life cycle assessments or full carbon accounting. And this is considering the fact that life cycle emissions could lead to different results. So in 2020, for the EU 27, we see a gross reduction of 528 megatons of CO2 equivalent of greenhouse gas emissions that has been realized due to the additional consumption of renewable energy. And with the total EU 27 emissions were approximately 3,377 megatons of CO2 equivalent, the additional uptake of renewable energy has led to a gross reduction of greenhouse gas emissions of about 13.5%. So that is what we have established in this report about the avoided costs and emissions. Now there's one final section that I want to talk to you about, and this is the innovation and competitiveness indicators. I invite you to all have a closer look at the tables and figures, because there's quite a lot of them per technology, and I won't bore you with 100 slides today, so I'll share just a few highlights of the report on the public and private investments and the international trade. So the public investments, we've gathered data for the European Union, but also for other countries in the public sector. Unfortunately, we didn't have the data for the other countries outside of the EU 27 for the private sector. But if we're looking at the public sector, we see that the US has the highest public expenditure, just over 500 million euros, followed by Japan and the leader in the EU 27, Germany. If we look at the total investments from the public sector, we see that the EU 27 and the European Commission combined are almost account for 1 billion euros of public investments. And when you're looking at the share of the GDP that is invested in the public R&D, we see that the EU invested about 0.0025%. And if you want to look at the other numbers of the GDP, it's a nice comparison to also make for the countries outside of Europe, but I won't show you them in detail now. Then there's the private investments. So there's a lot more private investments going on in the renewable energy sector. As I said, we only have data for the European countries, where Germany is also the leader with more than 2 billion euros of investments in the private sector. And interestingly, Denmark has also really increased their expenditure in the last years. The data for the private investments are for 2017 and 2018 only, so that's the latest update we have here, but they have increased their amounts to more than 1 billion euros. And they also have the highest GDP share of the EU 27, namely 0.34%. Interestingly, and maybe not surprisingly, most of the investments go to wind energy, over 60%, and almost 30% of the investments in the private sector go to the solar industry. And well, if we want to compare the GDP shares, we see that the EU 27 average GDP share has increased to 0.032%, which is a tenfold lower than Denmark, but still higher than the public investments. And well, if you want to see the report, these are the tables that you can find there. So we have a column where we show the real numbers in euros, and also the share of GDP. Then we'll go to the final slide of my part for today, the international trade of renewable energy technologies. This is a way of showing how the export of renewable energy technologies take place in the world. And when we look at the position of the EU, we see that we have an extremely strong position in wind power. Namely, about 80% of all exports come from Europe, mainly from Germany, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Spain. And we're also leading in biofuels and in hydropower. We're secondly PV, which is also maybe not too surprising, as the strongest exporter of PV is China. Note that CN means China and CH means Switzerland. It's always can be confusing if you don't know the abbreviations yet, but so not Switzerland is a leader yet. They're trying, I think, but China has 42% of the exports of the world on PV now, and they're second in wind power and then hydro. And furthermore, if we look at biofuels, we said that the US is second, and Brazil comes in third. Now, a way to visualize this is in a map like this. This is also a new visualization that is included in the report, so please have a look in more detail to see where all the renewable energy exports are going. Maybe a few short conclusions: that we see a negative export from Europe to China, Japan, and Brazil, and we see positive exports with the US, the UK, and a few other countries. And note that, the data is based on selected product classes, which are difficult to delineate from other products. Hence, these classes do not reflect all the trade in the renewable energy technologies. But I think overall we see that Europe has still a very competitive side, but are slightly losing a few shares. That's all we could share from TNO and Vito's efforts in this EurObserv'ER project for today's webinar. And thank you for listening. I would like to hand it over back to you, Roman.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Floris, for these comprehensive insights on the single chapters that you have provided together with Vito in the project. Before I respond to a question from the chat, I just like to remind all viewers here that this presentation will be provided to you on our project website. Of course, you can download the report on our project website, and EurObserv'ER has also set up a database where you can download all the figures, not only the reports, but also the figures, and you can use these interactive database to compile graphs and images and tables for your publications if you need that, because we saw that some shares of the audience comes from the academic sphere or research. If you want to use EurObserv'ER figures, you're free to do that, and just leave a reference to our project and our website, but this is possible in the interactive database. But all data, methodology reports, press releases, presentations are available on the website. You can also follow us on Twitter or subscribe to our newsletter so you are informed. So far, I have just seen one question from the audience in the chat, and it's directed towards Floris. It's about the avoided expenses section, and Marcelo asks if the avoided expenses value includes the expenses in renewable energy. If not, then how much were the expenses in renewable energies? I would simply like to hand over to Floris again. Can you respond to this request?
That is a good question. I have to be honest that this was the work of Vito that I'm not completely in detail with. So I'm not sure if there is anyone from Vito actually here today that may be able to explain a bit more about it. But otherwise, I don't want to say things that I might regret. So maybe it's better to leave that question for later and yeah, see if we can answer that maybe afterwards.
I agree. I think we should have a look at the exact methodology and data and see if we can find a solution and an answer to this question already in the report. But Marcelo, it's noted. Let's see if we can get back to you with a response from Vito. Another question pops up in the chat. So, what is the ratio of private investments to public investments? And in private investments, how much is to R&D? Floris, do you see the question in the chat?
Good question. So I guess you're looking at the ratio of private and public investments, maybe just in total numbers. If we can, maybe we can quickly go back to the slides. I don't know if you can. Yeah, one further. No, one. And then if you click once more. Yes. So so here we see that at least if you look at the EU investments that account for almost 1 billion euros. And actually, if you click once more, we see the total of the private investments, which are 4.3 billion euros. So maybe that gives an indication of the ratio of how much is invested publicly and privately. If you want to look at the exact ratio, you can obviously look at the report at the totals of these sectors, and you can also look at the ratios between the specific technologies. So there's one table for the private and the public for each of the technologies. So if you're interested in those specific ratios, you feel free to look at that as well. Does that answer your question?
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot for responding to that. Is there another question from the audience directly related to the figures or the graphs that were indicated? I don't see it as at this point. Maybe we just wait. Maybe someone is typing still a question which we might address. Here's one. Is there any noticeable trend in the incorporation of ocean energy in the last years? Maybe I can respond to that. We have released last year, and Diane, please correct me or add up. We have released for the first time a barometer on ocean energy, and with some data on the installed capacities and energy generation from ocean energy from different types of applications in the European Union. This is, of course, still a relatively small renewable energy technology, a new one, emerging one with a huge theoretical potential. But if you want to have the latest available figures on that, have a look at the Ocean Energy Barometer, which EurObserv'ER has provided. Yes, still, as it stands, it is emerging, but not yet, of course, competitive or at a scale like the other renewable energy technologies like wind power, wind energy, photovoltaics in the European Union. So, ocean, let's see what happens here. Diane, do you want to add up something on that?
No, you highlighted it well, Roman. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. So, if there is another question, I think we might have time for one more question before our scheduled time of this key result presentation of the EurObserv'ER annual report is over. Of course, you are free to ask us questions. We have on our website, you can write an email to Diane, which is indicated. The email address is here if there's questions, but of course have a look at the project website, EurObservER.org, and where you can find all the reports, press releases, the data, the graphics, or you follow us via the newsletter subscription or on Twitter. So you are informed about any new publication and about the status of renewable energy in the European Union 27. Okay, as it stands, I do not see another question. So thanks again to all the speakers who have provided some information on our report and on our publications. Thanks also on behalf of the entire team to the audience and to the European Commission and the DJ Energy who is funding this project. We hope you stay tuned to our publications and stay informed, and that we meet again, well, next year for this webinar and result presentation, but also for the interim technical barometers and reports, and that you stay tuned to our publications. Thanks a lot for your time, and get back to us for feedback if you wish. We will provide the slides and the recording on our website as well, so that this information will be provided to the interested public in the European Union. Thanks a lot. Take care, stay healthy, and hope to hear from you soon and till later. Bye.